Moving on to the next piece of our PBS puzzle is target credit range, or TCR for short. TCR is the driving force for constructing your line. Whether or not you use a TCR can determine how your award finalizes. Target credit range allows us to tell PBS exactly how much or how little we'd like to fly, anywhere from as low as 40 hours for the month to as high as 110 hours. As with everything else in PBS, target credit range is seniority driven. Contractually, the default range is 70 to 90 hours, meaning if you don't use this property, the system assumes that you're okay with anything between 70 and 90 hours. Low time is defined as anything below 70, 40 to 69 hours. High time is defined as anything above 90 or 91 to 110 hours. Being able to hold high or low time is based on the bids of other people at your base. The targeted line average, which you will find in the message board of the PBS dashboard, tells you how many hours each lineholder flight attendant, on average, can expect to fly that month at your particular base. Bidding and holding high or low time is predicted on other flight attendants bidding and holding the opposite. For every hour of high time that is awarded, there has to be an hour of low time awarded, thereby maintaining that targeted line average per flight attendant. If you choose to bid a TCR, here are a few tips. We encourage you to bid incrementally throughout all 7 layers. We'll show you an example of this in later slides. It's also wise to broaden your TCR in later layers. In early layers, tell the system truly how much you want to fly, but if you are unsure that your seniority can hold high or low time, it may be a good idea to back yourself up with a broader target credit range in later layers. Depending on your seniority, you may want to consider bidding a TCR that includes your base's targeted line average. This way, if you are held to a TCR closer to that average, you could be backing yourself up if you are trying to bid high or low time. Bid using a minimum of a 5-hour range. As an example, if you prefer to fly closer to the low end of the default, you'd want to bid 70 to 75. We do not recommend bidding in smaller increments like 70 to 72. And lastly, don't bid 0. If you were to bid a 0 in your TCR preference, PBS would not read it and it would go to the default of 70 to 90 hours. There is a huge difference between holding low time or between 70 and 90 hours. Use the applicable target ranges when bidding. I want to explain a few more things about the target credit range. The highest and lowest TCR you bid will serve as an anchor throughout your 7 layers. In this example, this flight attendant is bidding low time. They have done as we suggested and used 5-hour increments and also broadened the TCR in later layers. The first layer bid is 40 to 45 hours. This is telling PBS that the flight attendant wants to fly as close to the minimum as possible, but being aware that they may not necessarily hold low time. The flight attendant has incrementally increased her TCR bid in subsequent layers. Even if you don't type in 40 as in each layer, PBS remembers that low anchor. Layer 1 is 40 to 45 hours. Layer 2 has 45 to 50 hours entered, but since TCR is cumulative, the actual TCR in Layer 2 is 40 to 50. This is telling the system, remember, I still want as close to 40 hours as possible, but if you need to go above 45, I don't want you to go above 50, if possible. Layer 3 has 50 to 55 hours entered. This is the same scenario where the TCR is actually 40 to 55, requesting the system to give closer to 40, but has the ability to go up to 55 if necessary. This continues to accumulate through the layers. The same would apply for someone bidding high time. In this example, we see that the flight attendant has bid high time. They want to hold an award as close to the maximum as possible, so they bid 105 to 110 hours in Layer 1. This may look a little unusual since the higher TCR is the last to be listed, but double check the layer selection boxes to the right and you will see that the 105 to 110 is selected for Layer 1. The system is merely arranging the preferences in numerical order from top to bottom. We see the flight attendant is relaxing the TCR bid or giving a little bit more breathing room when it comes time to complete her award. The 110-hour high bid still serves as an anchor throughout all 7 layers, just as the low 40-hour bid did for the other flight attendant who is bidding low time. We know that there is an exception to every rule, and TCR is no exception. If at your seniority you can't hold high or low time, you could be held to a maximum line credit value or minimum line credit value. That minimum or maximum would then become your anchor. Here's an example of that. In Philadelphia, people tend to bid and fly high time. Flight attendant Gina has 20 years of seniority and is one of those high flying flight attendants. She likes to bid 105 to 110 hours in her TCR, but she can't always hold high time in her PBS award. In her June award, she was held to a maximum of 82 hours. By the time it had reached her seniority, the system had already awarded all the high time it was able to award, so she was held to a maximum of 82-hour award. That became her high anchor. Phoenix is typically the opposite as far as TCR bidding behavior is concerned. Many flight attendants prefer to bid and fly low time, but the same rules apply to low time as they do for high time awards. You, a 15-year flight attendant in Phoenix, bids low time in his layer 1 as 40 to 50 hours. Because so many people senior to him also bid low time, by the time PBS reaches his seniority, it has already awarded all the low time it can. Because of this, he is held to a minimum of 78 hours for that bid award. This is why it's important to keep your base's target line average and thinking about bidding a target credit range that includes that average in layer 7. TCR is all about the math. The value of the pairings you bid should add up to the target credit range you bid. We've come up with a very simple example to illustrate this. Donald is fairly senior and can hold pretty much whatever he wants. In his first layer, he bids for 4 specific roam pairings. Those pairings are worth 18 hours and 50 minutes each. 4 of those roam pairings add up to 75 hours and 20 minutes. He would want to include the value of those 4 trips in his TCR, so a safe bid would be 75 to 80 hours. If Donald had just guessed at how much the trip was worth and said around 75, and then bid a TCR of 70 to 75 for all 7 layers, he would not have held all 4 of the roam trips. It's understandable that you may not always know how much every trip will add up to, which is why it's okay to tell the system how much you really want to fly, but give it some room to work with. One last thing before we close this lesson on target credit range. I want to talk to you about vacation low. Those flight attendants that have 7 or more days of vacation in one bid month are prioritized for holding low time ahead of those flight attendants that don't have 7 or more days of vacation. The vacation low logic essentially creates 2 pools of people who are bidding low. Those that have 7 or more days of vacation and those that don't. Those that do have 7 or more days, they are given priority in seniority order for holding low time. After all the vacation low people are awarded low time, the system will determine if it can continue to award low time. Those that don't have 7 or more days of vacation will then be considered for vacation low in seniority order. It's important to understand this process. If all the low time is awarded to vacation low flight attendants, even the most senior flight attendant at the base may not be able to hold low time if they fall in the other category, those bidding low. Let's investigate the facts. Should you or should you not bid a TCR? Well, that's completely up to you. If you are okay with being awarded anywhere from 70 to 90 hours, then you don't necessarily have to bid this property. However, you may want to be a little bit more specific. Let's look at an example of Shirley, who's based in Charlotte. She likes to fly between 90 to 100 hours, but for the month of June she forgot to bid a TCR, so the system used the default of 70 to 90 hours. When using the default target credit range, you are allowing the system to complete your award anywhere in that 20-hour range. In Shirley's case, the system stopped when it reached 72 hours. That was her PBS award. After bids were final, she needed to go to ETB or TTS to pick up an extra 28 hours. She was senior enough to hold a higher TCR, but because she didn't tell the system she wanted 90 to 100 hours, the system did not award her that high. But let's look at an example of Jessie in New York. She is a young mother who, if she can help it, only wants to fly Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. She does not care what trip she flies, what airport she flies out of, or what time her sign-in times are, as long as she can confine her flying to those 3 days each week. As such, she is okay with flying anywhere between 70 and 90 hours. In her case, it might be okay to not use the TCR property because she would be satisfied with any award that works only those 3 days of a week. There is no right or wrong answer for how you should bid target credit range. It is a personal choice. You now have the ability to request a low or high time award or simply an award that falls within a certain credit range without the necessity of picking up or dropping trips. Tell the system how you want to fly, but like all things, we encourage you to utilize Layer 7 as your backup.